In the middle of the 14th century, Europe was alive with trade, movement, and crowded cities. People went to bed healthy and sometimes never woke up the same. A sudden fever would strike without warning. Painful, dark swellings appeared beneath the arms and along the neck. Within days, sometimes even hours, entire households were gone. Church bells rang so constantly that cities stopped counting the dead. Graveyards overflowed, streets grew quieter each morning. And across Europe, one terrifying question echoed everywhere. Was this the end of the world? For centuries, history has given us a simple answer. It was the rats. The story says infected fleas rode on rats arriving by ship. From rats to fleas, from fleas to humans, a tragic but straightforward chain of infection. And when merchant ships docked in 1347, the nightmare began. Sailors staggered onto the docks, already sick. Within days, dock workers and townspeople collapsed. The disease did not stay at the harbor. It moved through the city with frightening speed. Trade routes stretched from Central Asia to Europe. Caravans crossed vast landscapes, linking distant worlds. Merchants carried silk, spices, and something unseen. But here's where the story begins to crack. If rats were responsible, the spread should have been slower. Rats don't travel across continents in months, yet the plague raced from city to city. It crossed mountains, rivers, and borders with alarming speed. Even in freezing winters, it did not slow down. Entire families fell sick almost at once. So where were the massive rat die-offs, and why did the pattern look more human than rodent? In many cities, there were no reports of streets filled with dead rats. Grain stores weren't always destroyed or overrun. In some regions, rats were barely mentioned at all. Yet the death toll kept rising, and it rose with terrifying consistency. The plague often peaked during the coldest months of winter, but rats decline in harsh winter conditions. Cold temperatures slow their movement and reproduction. So why did the disease accelerate when rats should have struggled? Something didn't match the rodent theory. In crowded churches, people prayed shoulder to shoulder. In taverns, strangers shared cups and air. In markets, merchants leaned close to bargain. Cities were dense, people were closer than ever. And the symptoms weren't always limited to buboes. Some victims developed violent coughs, they struggled to breathe, and sometimes they died within days. This was a different form of plague. A form that attacks the lungs. Pneumonic plague spreads through breath, through droplets in the air, through simple human contact. One cough in a crowded room could be enough. Unlike rats, people travel fast. They move between cities, ports, and trade hubs. They sleep in shared inns and ships. They exchange clothing, bedding, and goods, and they carry parasites with them. Human fleas and lice lived directly in clothing. They thrived in layered wool and winter garments. Unlike rats, they stayed attached to people, and when people moved, the parasites moved too. Modern researchers began modeling the spread pattern. What they found was surprising. The speed matched human travel routes, not rat migration patterns. The Black Death may not have been driven primarily by rats, it may have followed the movement of people. Perfect below is part 3, scenes 6190. Each step is written for tilde 6 seconds of narration, but no timestamps are shown, exactly as you requested. In crowded medieval cities, people lived closer than ever before in human history. Homes were small, families were large, and personal space barely existed. Markets, churches, and taverns became perfect environments for rapid transmission. In these spaces, breath mixed freely in enclosed air. If pneumonic plague was present, it needed no rat at all. A single infected traveler could ignite an outbreak overnight. And unlike rodents, travelers crossed regions in days, not years. Ships carried dozens of sailors in tight, airless quarters. Inns packed strangers into shared rooms and shared bedding. Winter clothing trapped warmth and parasites. Lice and human fleas lived directly inside heavy wool garments. They fed on human blood and rarely left their host. When clothing was traded or reused, parasites moved with it. When refugees fled cities, they unknowingly carried infection outward, and far more like human movement. Outbreaks erupted simultaneously in distant cities, sometimes without any clear rat infestation beforehand. This puzzled modern historians and epidemiologists alike. Because the speed defied traditional explanations, researchers began reconstructing medieval travel routes. They mapped merchant pathways and shipping networks. Then they overlaid mortality data on those routes. The match was striking. The plague spread along human trade arteries. Ports were hit first, then inland hubs. From there, the disease radiated outward. It followed people, not rodent colonies, and that realization changed everything. The Black Death may have been powered primarily by us. Mass graves discovered centuries later began revealing new clues. Scientists extracted DNA from teeth buried since the 1300s. The bacterium was confirmed without doubt. But the transmission pattern told a deeper story. The spread curve matched dense human populations. It surged where cities were tightly packed. It slowed where people were isolated. That pattern mirrors airborne disease behavior, not rodent-based ecological spread. Some outbreaks killed victims in just 3 days. That rapid decline is typical of pneumonic infection. The lungs fill, breathing fails, death follows quickly. No flea bite is required for that, just proximity, just breath. In crowded cities, that was everywhere. Even prayers became dangerous gatherings. Markets turned into silent transmission hubs. Shared cups passed more than ale. Shared beds passed more than warmth. And winter clothing passed more than comfort. Human parasites thrived in layered garments. Unlike rats, they traveled directly with their host. They required no separate population explosion. They needed only movement and contact, and medieval Europe was built on both. Trade never truly stopped even during fear. Ships continued docking at desperate ports. Caravans continued crossing vast landscapes. People continued fleeing infected cities, and with every movement the plague moved too. As cities emptied, silence replaced noise. Markets once filled with life stood abandoned. Doors remained closed for days at a time. Entire bloodlines vanished in a single week. Fear reshaped how people saw each other. A cough became a threat. A neighbor became a risk. Even family members kept distance when possible. But distance was nearly impossible in medieval homes. Families slept together in shared rooms. Warmth meant closeness. Closeness meant exposure, and exposure meant survival was uncertain. The disease did not respect wealth or status. Merchants, peasants, priests, none were spared. The speed of infection shocked entire kingdoms. Officials struggled to explain what was happening. Some blamed divine punishment, others blamed foreign traders. Few understood the invisible mechanism at work. Modern models now reveal that mechanism clearly. The plague followed density and travel patterns. It surged along commercial arteries. It expanded through human gatherings. It accelerated in confined spaces. These are signatures of human-driven spread, not purely rodent ecology. Rats may have started outbreaks in some regions, but humans amplified them exponentially, and that amplification changed history forever. By the early 1350s, Europe had been transformed. Some cities lost nearly half their population. Fields went unharvested, workshops stood silent, entire regions felt permanently altered. But the question remained, how did it spread so fast? Modern epidemiology offers a clearer answer. Rapid transmission requires close human contact, and medieval Europe had it everywhere. Crowded housing accelerated exposure, trade networks accelerated distance. Winter clothing accelerated parasite survival, and fear accelerated movement between regions. Each fleeing group carried the disease outward. Each arriving ship restarted the cycle. Each crowded room magnified transmission. This was not just a rodent story. It was a human system story, a story of networks and density, a story of breath and proximity. The bacteria remained the same, but the engine of spread was human. Human trade routes, human gatherings, human parasites embedded in clothing, human lungs passing infection through air. The Black Death followed the movement of people. It surged where people clustered tightly. It faded where human contact slowed, and that realization changes how we understand history. For centuries, the rat carried the blame. It was simple, visual, and easy to understand. But history is rarely that simple. Rats may have played a role, yet they were likely not the main driver. The speed of the Black Death tells a different story, a story powered by human movement, by crowded cities and trade networks, by shared air and shared space. By clothing layered thick against winter cold, and by parasites that never left their hosts. When people moved, the plague moved. When people gathered, it intensified. When people fled, it spread outward. It behaved like a human-amplified epidemic, not purely a rodent-driven disaster. Modern research continues refining this picture. But the pattern remains consistent. The Black Death followed people, and it followed them relentlessly. Ports were first, then inland cities, trade hubs ignited before rural villages. Outbreaks aligned with human pathways, not isolated rat habitats. This changes how we see the pandemic. It wasn't just nature attacking humanity, it was humanity amplifying nature. Our density made it stronger, our networks made it faster, and our movement made it unstoppable. Between 1347 and 1353, Europe changed forever. An estimated 25 to 50 million people died. Entire towns vanished from the map. Generations were erased in a few short years. Survivors walked through silent streets. Homes stood empty, doors left open, workshops gathered dust. Church bells eventually fell quiet, but the scars remained. Economies collapsed, then slowly rebuilt. Labor shortages reshaped social systems. Power structures shifted. The medieval world was forced to transform, and all of it began with invisible transmission. Not just rats in the shadows, but humans standing too close, breathing the same air. Sharing the same spaces, wearing the same layers of clothing, traveling the same crowded routes. The Black Death reveals a powerful truth: pandemics exploit human systems. They move along our connections, they accelerate through our networks, they grow stronger where we cluster, and they weaken where contact slows. History often simplifies complex disasters. But deeper investigation tells a richer story. The real cause was not just rodents. It was the way humans lived. The evidence reshapes a story we thought we knew. Rats may have sparked outbreaks in some places, but humans turned sparks into infernos. Trade routes became highways of infection. Crowded ports became ignition points. Shared air carried unseen danger, shared clothing carried hidden parasites, and shared fear pushed people to flee. Every escape attempt spread it further, every gathering intensified the chain. The plague followed density, it followed movement, it followed connection, it did what epidemics always do, it exploited human behavior. The Black Death was biological, but its speed was social. Its scale was structural, and its devastation was amplified by us. That is the uncomfortable truth. History often searches for simple villains, but the real engine was human systems. Our cities were too dense, our networks were too connected, our lives were too intertwined. The rats were part of the story, but not the whole story. The Black Death followed people. And people carried it everywhere. That realization changes how we see the past. So what really caused the Black Death? Not just rats in dark alleyways, not just fleas jumping from fur to skin, but human proximity on an enormous scale, human networks stretching across continents, human breath shared in crowded rooms, human parasites woven into daily life. and human movement that never truly stopped. The bacteria was deadly, but human systems made it unstoppable. Ports connected distant worlds. Cities concentrated thousands into tight spaces. Trade never paused long enough to contain it. Fear only pushed it further. The Black Death wasn't just a medieval tragedy, it was a lesson in how societies function. Dense populations create vulnerability, interconnected networks increase speed, and proximity turns outbreaks into pandemics. The rats were part of the story, but humans were the accelerant. Our systems amplified the pathogen, our structure multiplied the damage, our movement spread it everywhere. That is the deeper cause. The Black Death followed people. And people carried it across the world. History remembers the devastation, but understanding the mechanism matters, because epidemics still follow the same rules today.